So hello and welcome. Happy Monday. I'm Frederick Dunn and this is The Way to Bee. So today what am I doing? I am harvesting honey from my Flow-Hive. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to answer a long list of questions that I've received through the years about Flow-Hive harvesting. So anyway, I'm going to show you, first of all, this top box is hoop pine and the bottom is cedar. And I'm showing you that on the end panels here that we can see these flow frames are capped. So this thing is ready to go. That's why I decided to make this video. There's a hive visor on there made out of aluminum. There is a very important piece of kit right there, your chair. There's going to be a lot of sitting around during the harvesting of flow honey. So we're checking the other side here too. There are windows on both sides. And we see that it's all capped and ready to go. This is pretty darn important. You want as many of the cells to be capped with beeswax as possible because this limits the amount of leakage that's going to occur inside your hive. Here's the other thing. We need to look at the spirit level. We need to make sure that the bubble is right on center here, and that means that your hive is tilted back 2 degrees, and that's important for harvest because we're just using gravity to get the honey out of the hive. If you've never heard of a flow hive, this should be hopefully interesting to you. You pull this back panel cover off and we can see the end cells of every frame in here. And this is the 7-frame Flow Super. You may be wondering, that matches the 10-frame langstroth size bottom box. And it's sealed up with beeswax and propolis. Exactly what we like to see. Some of the cells are still being filled and that is not a problem. In this video, we're going to harvest all 7 of these frames, and I'm going to show you the tools we use. These are the keys. I have a lot of flow hives, and I've been doing this. This is finishing out my 9th year. Now, the flow hive comes out of New South Wales, Australia, and they finished 10 years. So this is my 9th final season. Next year will be my 10th year. I've been keeping bees since 2006. So we put these brackets on that come with your flow hives, and you back out the screw here, slide these on, and guess what? The panel that covers the back side of the hive, so the entrance is on the other side. When we pull it off, it becomes a shelf. Pretty neat and tidy. Now sometimes I do use other shelves that are used by myself, but I'm trying to stick with the gear that Flow provides. I'm going to be filling a bunch of different kinds of jars today. I have an order, a demand, if you will, from the supervisor, who's my grandson. He's 10 now, and he has customers that are waiting for honey, and this is a nice warm day, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. So the hotter the day, of course, the better the honey's going to flow. And then I'm going to pull these upper caps off. This is where you control the flow frames. We're going to stick the keys in here, and we're going to open them in short segments, not all at once. And I want to show you the tubes that the honey's going to come out of. See that little tongue sticking out? When you open up the trough cover in the back of the flow frame, you'll see that there's propolis or beeswax or a combination of both right there at the bottom. That little tongue will poke that open. That's important because that trough is going to be full of honey as it comes out and fills our jars. But when we're done, we're going to put the cap back on, and the bees are going to be able to lick up the residual honey because they don't have access. There's also a little marker indicator here. That is the depth indicator. So make sure that when you push it in there, not only do you clear out the propolis and the beeswax, but that you go all the way in and match that line. So bottoming clearance, whatever you want to call it, that's how it should go. Then I'm going to pull it out and show you. See, we've opened it up now. See the little tongues down there. When the surplus honey collects in the bottom of that trough, the bees will reclaim it. So this hive is nicely sealed up. Every time you cycle a honey flow from one of these flow supers, you tend to get more honey. And with 7 frames, you get a little over half a gallon per frame. So we're going to do the math too. I'm going to show you at the very end exactly what the yield was from this particular harvest. You can get a couple of harvests a year out of this, depending on where you live, what the nectar flow is like. Don't forget your forceps. Why do you need those? Well, because sometimes a wasp or even a honeybee drops into your honey jar if you don't have it closed up. You can of course cover them with saran wrap or something like that. Now I'm showing you, I couldn't do that one-handed while I was holding the phone. So I put the keys in there 2 at a time, I prefer, and then I crack about 1/3 of it. So I just push it in about 1/3 of the length, crack those open, and then we watch the honey drip down and come out of that food grade tube and drip into whatever you want it to go into. Your quart jars, your honey bears, whatever you happen to have. I do want to say something before I get into the questions that I receive frequently. Please do not combine all of the honey from all these frames into one container. I know there's a great temptation. I mean, we could just walk away from it. Let's be honest, this is patient beekeeping. Look how slow the honey's coming out. That's because it has a very low moisture content this time of year. The bees are in control of that. But we want to make sure that we get each frame separated in the way that we collect the honey, because the flavors, the scents, the mouthfeel, all that cool stuff is going to be somewhat unique to each and every frame, because it's taken them a while to do it. Let's hit up some questions here. So the very first question, the most common one that I get, remember I've been doing this for 9 years. I do a question and answer series on my channel, which is Frederick Dunn. And the top question, do Flow-Hives really work? Yes, they work. And I don't do a lot of Flow-Hive videos. And that's the next question I get. Well, then why don't you do more Flow-Hive videos? Because I've done so many already. So if you go to my website, which is thewaytobee.org, there's a page there. And it's called the Flow-Hive Experience. All my videos from the very first year when they came out to this one today will be on that page. You can learn about wintering. You can learn about how I've configured it for the northeastern part of the United States, which is where I live, state of Pennsylvania, northwestern part of the state of Pennsylvania. That's right, I live in the snow belt. So we get a lot of questions. Let's just move on from, does it work? Yes, it works, and there goes a honeybee right in, which is exactly why we need what? The forceps. Bees are silly. Now you could, as I mentioned, cover it with saran wrap or something. This bee does not care. If you notice, this is funny to me. Honeybees, when they drop into the honey, they're doomed. They would absolutely die without our help. But somehow, they don't care. They sit in the honey and continue to drink the honey. So we're going to move on from that. Why is honey leaking from my Flow-Hive? I get that question a lot too. Well, you need to wait until all of the frames are capped with honey. And I'd also like you to pay attention to the fact that I only open these in increments, because we don't want to see this trough, that tube, full all the way to the top, because if it gets overwhelmed, some of the honey is going to dribble down inside the hive. The good news there is there's an aluminum screen at the bottom, and there's a tray under that, and you can reclaim the honey. So before you do this process, pull your trays out from the bottom board, clean them really well, knowing that honey, surplus honey, might be dripping in there, and you're going to want to reuse that. But what I do is collect it in the tray, and I put it out at a feeding station later, and I let the bees reclaim it. But clean it first. We don't want a bunch of little bits and pieces of things that we don't want in honey down in that tray, just in case you might want to collect it yourself. So the honey leaks, you can collect it. Don't open all your frames at one time. I've done all these tests. I've made all these mistakes through the years just to see what would happen. And if you do that, you can expect almost the entire bee population in this hive to move out on the front of the beehive. Now, there's a lot of questions that we get related to that, but that's the best answer I can give you. How can I clean and maintain the flow frames, Fred? How long do they last? Well, I just this year, so let's see, it's the 9th year, I did get rid of my original Flow Super frames. You can get just a Flow Super. You don't need the entire hive. If you've got a really good langstroth hive, they are compatible. You'll find these are about 1/4 inch narrower in width. They're the same length front to back than a standard langstroth hive. You can also get them in a 6 frame, which matches the langstroth 8 frame. So they're just a little narrower on these at the top. So anyway, once they're old, once the frames are old, can you clean them? That is another frequently asked question, and yes, you can. And so you can dip them and agitate them in hot water. And how hot can the water be? 150 degrees Fahrenheit is what I recommend, because we have to melt out the beeswax, and we want to get that propolis soft enough so that we can work that out. So you open your frames, you pull the caps off, you put them in hot water, you agitate them, however you choose to do that, and you'll melt away everything, and then rinse them off, put them back in the closed position. So you want them in the open position while you're cleaning them out. Then you put them in the closed position, leave the caps off, let bees and stuff clean them out. These trough areas are normally closed and not accessible to your bees, so you will leave those open so they can clean out those areas. And then close them up and dry them out and put them in storage for the following year. We do not leave these on for winter, ever. So anyway, what happens if honey crystallizes in the flow frame? Well, what happens if honey crystallizes in any extracted or unextracted frame, right? Capped honey, crystallized, what can you do? You can put it in your warmer. So I happen to have a tent with a dehumidifier. It also heats things up to about 110 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on how hot you want it. And if you put flow frames in there that have crystallized honey in them, guess what? The honey reliquefies. It can take a few days to do it, but it does. And then while it's hot, of course, before it gets a chance to reset or crystallize, you cycle it out. You don't need to have your flow frames in a flow hive to draw it out. This just lets this happen. Those are bits of wax and propolis coming out there, and that's fine with me. 100% edible. By the way, we can see that that channel is filling up, so now it's open to 2/3 the depth. And we're getting quite a bit of honey out of here, but I want you to know this is a game of patience. You're going to sit out here on a day in these temperatures. It's going to take you a couple hours minimum to get the honey out. But if it crystallizes, you can rewarm it and then just process it while it's hot. How much honey comes out of that Flow Super is what I am asked frequently. Little over half a gallon per frame. And as I mentioned before, the more times they use it, the more honey they seem to produce. So I think they're adding depth to the cells, and you get quite a lot of honey if you've got the patience to let them finish out all frames before you do it. See how full that tube is? That's the maximum flow you want. You're not going to speed things up by opening more of those leaves at this point. So actually I kind of overdid it here. Remember, you run a risk of opening too much at once, and then if you do that, if some of those cells are not capped with beeswax, you're going to get some leakage inside the hive, and it'll go through the screen down into that tray in the bottom, and you won't have it in your jars. And hopefully the bees can collect most of that on the way down. So anyway, that answers the question about how much honey comes out. How long does it take before I can harvest honey? You know what? That's not a question for flow hives in particular. That's a question for any honey anywhere in any apiary. That has to do with your nectar flow. It has to do with the conditions where you live, the bees that you're keeping, the health of those bees, the foraging days, and the quality of forage. I highly recommend that you go to a website called Beescape, beescape.org, and see if where you live you might have a dearth. You might not get a big nectar flow. You also might be facing pesticide loads and things like that. All that information can be gained right there. So can flow frames be put in a centrifuge? No, these are not designed at all for mechanical extraction, for the big processors. The whole purpose of the flow frames is so that you can sit here like we're doing right now in the apiary with the bees still working the hive, by the way. We did not smoke the hive. We didn't open the hive. We are not removing supers and getting our bees upset with us. We are leaving it right on the hive while we draw out the honey. And once you do that, you know what your bees are going to do? They're going to get right in those cells and clean it up again. And I've had seasons where You drained off all the flow frames, and 11 days later, if the weather cooperates, they were all refilled and recapped and ready for another harvest. Now, often people will be concerned, but if I take this off, what do they have for the winter time? Well, my winters are long, and that's a great question. I keep a medium frame, a medium super, full of medium frames of capped honey that goes on this hive to get them through winter. So there's the bottom box, which are all deep langstroth frames, standard. A lot of people use foundationless, and we use those over and over because that's where the brood is. And then we put that medium super on with capped honey. It's about 40 pounds of honey, and that will get them through our winters here where I live. You'll have to feel out kind of how much honey your bees are going to need where you live, but we do insulate the inner cover, we insulate the outer cover. This makes a huge difference. You can see a video about that on my website or by clicking on the playlist, which is the Flow-Hive Experience, and I talk about wintering your Flow-Hive. So yeah, it's not for big time processing. This is where you sit down and drink your coffee or your tea and visit with friends and just watch the honey come out, and you will be swapping out jars as they fill up. So, will the bees actually use a plastic flow frame? Yes, these are all food grade flow frames right here. The bees are using them. I frequently get asked, what do you do to get your bees to use those flow frames? I don't do anything. I just make sure they're clean. I would say the number one failure that I've seen in other people is that when they put their flow frames in, they forgot to lock them in the closed position. You need to cycle your frames all the way open, all the way closed, which means you end up putting your keys in the top slot, pushing them all down, and then looking at them from the side and making sure that all of your flow cells are aligned. If they aren't, the bees will not use them. But I don't spray them with sugar syrup. I don't rub beeswax on them. You can do all of those things and make it more appealing. Sometimes you can put a honey super on top of your flow super, a shallow or something like that, and get your bees to go up to that, and passing through, they might just work it up. But I don't do anything special and never have. You just have to put it on a strong colony. That's going to produce a surplus of honey. Often people want to know, what if you didn't have a queen excluder, and would the queen, or could the queen, lay eggs in those plastic flow frame cells? Yes, she could. Without a queen excluder, absolutely. This is also why you don't want to leave that flow super on through the winter time. And would they all be drones? No, they even have produced workers. How do I know? Because I tested that. I made a video about it, and I showed exactly what happens. So they are large cells. They're slightly larger than worker cells. They are slightly smaller than drone cells. So the goal was to make them less appealing to the queen to lay eggs. And they're deeper, by the way. Because remember, there are only 7 frames up here, and that takes up the space of a 10-frame langstroth box. So she can lay eggs, they can produce those, and it's something you don't want to happen. So, does the harvest process crush or harm the bees inside the cells? Because I get those comments, but they're accusatory. You're killing bees, you're crushing bees, you're chopping bees. Let me explain. I have never killed a single bee in any of my flow hives in all of the years I've been doing this. Not one. So even if there's a bee in one of the cells, when we cycle it, what happens? It gets pinned. In other words, it kind of gets trapped and has to wiggle out if it can. But if it doesn't, it just sits there stuck until it ultimately comes out when you close the cells again. They're not crushed. You don't see bee pieces and parts coming out in the honey, do you? Nothing is being chopped off of any bees at any time. The other question is, aren't Flow-Hive people just lazy beekeepers? Aren't they just people that don't want to keep bees? No, they are people, hopefully, that are interested in keeping bees. My goal here with my channel is to educate people about honeybees and all the different ways that we can keep them. I also like to share about as many different tools that are out there as possible, not so that you'll buy all the tools, but so that you'll have some real-time practical knowledge about what the tool is, how it works, how it doesn't, what the ups and downs are, and then you can decide, Is that for me? Is it something I want or something I need, or what's going on? So what's the deal with the flow hives? What's all the big hubbub? Well, in Melbourne, Australia, for example, they had honey tasting competitions. I hate to go there, but I have to. I interviewed honey sommeliers there, and I found out, do you know what process was producing the best honey in that area? Meaning that the floral sources are the same, the fields are the same, everything was the same, conditions are the same, other than the honey processing. The honey processing that involved flow frames, which are basically touchless honey processing. This does not go through any harvesting space. It does not get smoke puffed into it. You don't do anything to the honey, and hands down, it won across the board Flow-Hive honey. Here in the United States, we had the North American Honeybee Expo, one of the biggest gatherings, in fact, one of the largest submissions of honey in any honey competition, and those judges had a lot to say. There's something called the dark jar or black jar honey, which means it's being judged just on its aroma, its flavor, the quality of the honey. And do you know what won one year there? Flow-Hive honey. A friend of mine actually submitted that and won. So I appreciate that. And if you think about it, this honey is the most hands-off honey produced. So we don't damage bees when we're doing it. Does the Flow-Hive encourage lazy beekeepers? No. Does the exposed honey attract pests or cause robbing? I want you to look at this bee yard. There are bees flying in every direction. Now, I also want you to consider the fact that we have an ongoing nectar flow, which means sitting out here with these bees on this hot day, we're not getting mobbed back here. But keep in mind that there are asters, there's goldenrod still, there are floral resources, but we do occasionally get a bee that plops into, in this case, a honey bear. Now this honeybee, this worker, is clearly terrified. She is struggling to save her life, or not. I hope you can pick up on my cynical tone, because honeybees do this all the time. They plunk into the honey. Their tongue is still going. Their proboscis is spread apart. This worker honeybee just wants to get all the honey she can, and she doesn't even realize that she's in jeopardy. If you were not sitting here watching your honey bears get filled with honey, this bee ultimately would die. But of course, I reach in with my forceps. That's what they're there for. We pull this honeybee out, and I just set her off to the side. Other bees will come along and lick her clean. Even wasps will come because they just love honeybees, and they'll lend a hand and clean everything up. Here we are. It's all done. Everything's closed up. We are finished. And this is a very simple thing. So, treat your bees like you would in any other hive. Take care of them the way you would in any other hive. And now for the question, how much money can I make from my Flow-Hive? Oh, here you go. So September the 28th, yesterday, there were 37 honey bears harvested, and they're sold at $11 each. That's $407. 3 quarts of honey were collected. That's $22 each, $66. We had 8 pints at $12 each, $96. So the total harvest for this super from the Flow-Hive is $569. And on a good colony, you can get this twice a year. I hope that helps answer some of your questions. Of course, it's minus the cost of the bottles, the lids, and the labels. The supervisor, he's my #1 salesman. 10 years old, gets 20% of all sales. And learn more at thewaytobee.org and look at the Flow experience. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Don't shy away from Flow hives just because you've run into someone who's negative about them. They do work. This is proof. Thanks for watching. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this has been The Way to Bee.